Hi, and welcome to episode number 12 of the Introvert Biz Growth podcast, the show where I talk to introverts who grow their business and make a difference. Today, I'm actually trying out a new format with two shorter sessions. First, I'll share my thoughts on a specific topic. Today, it's authenticity. And then I will introduce another podcaster to you. His name is James Thorn, and he's the host of the Intronaut podcast. But let's start with my thoughts on authenticity. Actually, on my blog, on my LinkedIn business blog, I quite often got messages of people that tell me that they like my style because they think I'm authentic. And then just last week, CT, hi CT, thanks so much for your message. CT sent me a message also saying that he likes the podcast and that my authenticity comes through the mic and that he enjoys listening to my podcasts. So that, it obviously feels like a compliment because nowadays we kind of use authenticity as this buzzword. Everybody wants to be authentic. So it kind of made me think about this word and what does it actually mean? What does it mean to be authentic? And I think it can be best explained as being honest and true to others, but also true to ourselves and maybe sometimes allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and admitting our own mistakes or weaknesses. Right now, I'm thinking of the author Liz Gilbert, who's the author of Big Magic and Eat, Pray, Love. You might have read those books. To me, she's kind of this persona who really defines authenticity. She's just one of these people where you just always know that she's being very real. And just, I think 2 days ago, she actually came out and said that she's in love with another woman, where everybody kind of followed her story because when she was writing Eat, Pray, Love, she fell in love with this guy. So she came out of a big divorce and then she went through these three places. First it was Italy, then it was it Indonesia, or I think it was India first and then Indonesia. And then in Indonesia, she met this Brazilian guy. And so they have been married ever since she wrote that book, which is about probably 10 years now. And so about a month ago, she announced on her Facebook page that, she was not having a good time and that they were now getting divorced. And so already that, she has, I don't know how many thousands of followers. It's difficult to admit, right? It's difficult to say that, it didn't work out, especially because this guy is even part of her book. So it's kind of like it might probably made her feel like a failure and it made her really anxious to admitting that it just didn't work out. And now it went even further and she's basically telling the whole world that she fell in love with this other woman and that's why her marriage fell apart. So can you imagine actually publicly announcing that and just trying to be so real? And yeah, I don't know. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And so, anyway, I kind of digressed here, but that's when I think of authentic, I really think of Liz Gilbert because I think she is really just, being honest and true to herself and true to others. So, what about me then? Am I really always being authentic? I don't think so. I don't see myself as always being authentic. I know that when I'm being authentic, that's when I feel good. So it feels good within my body, my heartbeat is calm, I feel at peace. So yeah, being authentic is where I belong. But I don't always feel authentic, especially in business. I think you cannot always be authentic, honestly, because sometimes you just have to fake it until you make it. Um, and as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, why am I saying this? I don't want to say this anymore. So, but at the same time, I have this LinkedIn business, and it's kind of a different audience than people who are listening to my podcast, and it's more of a business audience, and I seem to have to appear as someone who really knows their stuff, and these people sometimes when I do presentations at networking events, they're like in suit and tie and they're all dressed up, and that's not me. But to some level I still have to adapt to that audience. If I would show up in a dirty t-shirt and cut off jeans, I probably wouldn't have the same credibility. So I'm not going to put on, high heels and a suit or a skirt or anything, but I still feel like I have to adapt to a certain level. And so that's where I'm not really being totally myself. That's not the same person that I'm being at home. Like right now, I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt talking to you. So I think there's moments where you have to kind of adapt to the situation. Also, I think what's important is that you can't confuse being authentic with being rude, and that's a big topic for me because that's where I see the word authenticity kind of turning into this buzzword and almost turning into an excuse of, oh, I'm sorry, but I'm just being authentic, so I'm going to just tell you that you're a real idiot for, doing what you're doing. I don't think it should be used that way. That's not cool to me. Yes, you can probably think that maybe, but there's still a way to say things to other people that are, that kind of have to go through a filter, in my opinion. It's funny because my mom, lovely lady, love her very much, but she has this thing where she just always says says the things that the way she thinks them. And that can, to some people who are not used to her, actually be quite surprising. She would. I remember she told me this story about a friend, or friend in quotation mark, that she really just didn't feel like they were. She didn't have time anymore. She said she didn't have time to invest in that relationship, and so she just bluntly told this friend, "Look, I just don't have time to spend with you anymore." And that's being very authentic. I agree. It's just, saying the things the way you think them. But at the same time, this friend is very upset. So I think that's where I would choose the way of not being that authentic and just kind of tell a white lie and just kind of like let it die out slowly. Um, I don't know what you would do in this situation, but in my opinion, there's always things that are worth standing up for and saying this is the way I do it and this is what I believe. And then there's other situations like this friendship where I just prefer not to hurt the other person's feeling. Maybe that maybe has to do a lot with the empathy that we introverts have as well. So that I would always put the other person's feelings probably first before my own authenticity. So yeah, don't confuse being authentic with being rude. And I just want to, end by saying that, in my opinion, authenticity is just a big word, and I think it just has to with start by being yourself and stop trying to be authentic. Um, Start by admitting your fears, admitting your mistakes, and and I think that being comfortable with being who you truly are will uh, will really set you free. So I'm really curious what it means to you to be authentic, and if you have any examples, or if there's situations where you, like me, would agree that it's not always the best thing to say exactly what you have in your head, and maybe that's where you are not truly authentic, but you're being not authentic in order to not hurt somebody else's feelings. So send me a message like CT did, or leave a comment if you're listening to this podcast on my website on the show underneath the show notes. Reach out to me. I'm really trying to, now that I get a bit more used to recording these podcasts, I'm trying to make them feel like more like a conversation rather than just, reading a script. It's not easy as an introvert. We like to be prepared and know in advance what we're going to say. But yeah, I do want to hear from you. This message from CT really made my day. So I look forward to connecting with you. And now let me introduce James Thorn from the Intronaut podcast to you. Hi, James. How are you today?
Oh, great, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for getting up so early for me.
I'm an early riser, so it wasn't too bad.
Oh, good. Okay. So, James, tell me a little bit about yourself and introduce your podcast to my audience.
Yeah, my podcast is called the Intronaut, a podcast for introverts, and it it's a relatively new venture. I started this in, I believe, March of this year, which would be 2016. And I started it. I have no idea why I started it, but I felt like there's sort of a movement's probably too strong of a word, but there's certainly something happening culturally, especially in the United States, where people are paying more attention to personality types, Myers-Briggs tests, and they're using those in very thoughtful ways. And I was just struck by the number. I'm a writer, a novelist, and I was struck by the number of my peers who were introverts, and I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to start talking about my own experience and my daily life and my past experience as an introvert, and we'll just see what happens. So that's what I did.
Wonderful. So is it oriented towards, readers of your books or just a general audience?
Yeah, it's not. I write mostly dark fantasy, horror, genre fiction, and so this podcast has nothing to do with that. It is strictly
I
for
was going to say thank
yeah.
God. But
It'd be an odd mix somewhat, but another part of it, and I think this is something I didn't necessarily realize at the time, but when I was seeing, other than Susan Cain, who we all know as introverts, the author of Quiet, there are a lot of websites and blogs and podcasts out there that are wonderful, and many of them are either hosted or run by um, introverts, but they are like millennials or lovely young women, and they're really good. But I realized that being a 45-year-old middle-aged white guy in the United States, they didn't really talk about sort of what my experience was. So
mm,
I thought I'll just bring a slightly different voice to the conversation and
that's
see if
interesting.
there are other people out there who are like me. And as it turns out, there are. And I think it's harder for men to
Mm,
talk about being an introvert. There seems to be a stigma around that because men are supposed to be strong and extroverted and providers,
yeah.
historically, and that's not true for everybody.
That's so powerful. So basically, there needs to be a male writer. Maybe it's you, James. Who knows? Who's gonna write a book about introverts? Because it's true. It kind of became okay after Susan Cain's book for women maybe to be on introverts, but it's true. Everybody I see out there who's publicly saying they're introverts, it's mostly women. So yeah,
It
that's a
is,
very
and
good
I've
point.
I've found too. Like I attended the podcast movement conference in Chicago this
Mm-hmm.
summer, and I had the great fortune of running into Pat Flynn
Mm-hmm.
of Smart Passive Income, and he's one of my favorite podcasters. He's one of the most successful podcasters in the world, and I only had about a minute with him, and in that minute we discovered he's a severe introvert as well,
Yeah.
but you would never know it, and it's not something he's going to he publicly trumps or says. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like I think there's probably a lot of men in particular who are introverts and may either don't know it or don't really talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I have this kind of different perspective because I'm from Europe. I grew up in Switzerland, but I've lived for 4 years in California, and it's very interesting how cultures are very different, and it really felt to me that in California, in America in general, being an introvert is even tougher than it might be in Europe. So
Hmm.
I was actually looking forward to moving back to Switzerland, not for myself, but I have my eldest son is also an extreme introvert. So I think he's having a much easier time here than he would have had in the US.
Wow, that's really interesting, and
Mm.
I joke about it too, like, I know as a middle-aged white guy in America, I get most of the the benefits of, from history, like, I'm not an oppressed segment of society by any means, my introvert problem is not a problem for not the same type of problem other people face. But that being said, I did think that there's definitely a voice that needs to be heard there, so.
Yeah, yeah. What about the whole idea of uh, a majority of creatives being introverts? Do you believe in that, or is that just a generalization? Because you're a creative.
I yeah, I think there's something to that. I don't have any hard data or case studies to back it up, but just in anecdotal experience, I've found that the majority of my writer friends are introverts. Some of them so much so that I've never even spoken to them. I've done co-writing projects with some, and we've never even talked. So yeah, and I had many years I fronted rock bands, and even in the music industry, I think people assume that if a performer is on stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people, that they're very comfortable and they're extroverted, and that's not always true either.
Mm,
There are a lot of musicians who sort of they put on the show and then they walk off stage and they just need to be alone. So
yeah.
yeah, I think that's a pretty safe generalization.
Okay. So, what are your plans for the show?
I don't know. I said when I started it, I was going to. It's sort of a memoir. It's part memoir. It's part self help. I have guests on, but I really don't have a big plan for it. And I said I'm just going to keep doing this if people are listening and if people want it, and that seems to be the case. And really, it's a very organic process. I have a brainstorm folder, and as I'm walking the neighborhood or doing laundry, I have an idea for a topic or a show, I'll drop it in there, and then I only about a week or two at a time. I just kind of see what's in there, what I feel like doing, and I go with it. And
Nice.
I don't know. And my podcast is short form, which means I keep all of my episodes 20 minutes or less. So it's not an onerous task for me, or it's not something overwhelming. It's something I can do within an hour a week, and that feels very manageable.
Yeah, I think the minute it becomes this, thing you have on your to-do list and you're like, "Oh, I still have to do this," then that's when it's not pleasure anymore, but duty. And I'm not sure that's a
Yes.
good thing for a podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, and then podcasting is a lot of work, and most podcasts are free, so there there isn't a lot of monetary compensation from
Exactly. So
podcasting.
somehow you have to, yeah, make sure it's either just fun and you just like doing it, or you have to find sponsors or things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Right.
tell us again where people can come and listen to your podcast. Is it theintronaut.com or?
It is, yep,
Okay, great.
theintronaut.com, and I'm at jthorn.net, so, those are really those are the 2 places, but like I said, my genre fiction career is, not at all related to the podcast, so if you're like, "Ah, I don't like scary stories," it's okay.
I do admit that I had to look you up. I'm like, is this guy safe? But I'm happy to confirm that it's been a pleasure talking to you, James. And I will put, of course, all the links in the show notes as well. And so go, if you're I'm not going to say white and male American because I'm hoping I have some, other males in my audience, but definitely go check out the podcast,
Thanks, Sarah, I really appreciate it.
Thanks for chatting with me, James. find James's podcast at theintronaut.com. Next time I'm talking to Ian Anderson Gray, a friend of mine based in the UK. That's it for this episode of the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast. You find the full show notes at sarahsantacroce.com/episode 12. And if you don't have it yet, get your free 4-step guide on how to say no to grow. Again, it would really make my day to hear from you, or if you leave me a review on iTunes, that'd be awesome too. I'll speak to you again in 2 weeks. Take care.